Bam. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the CanadaGuns Talk Show, episode 43. Reload. I'm your host, The Crover. There's a couple of people that would like to say hello to you. Folks, say hello.
Hi.
Hello. That's Janitor Pants, and that's Crazy9. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Those of you that are watching live, those of you that are watching later on, thank you for viewing the video afterwards. Folks, today is the third episode on reloading, and it is going to be a fun one because we're actually going to reload on screen, not just talk about reloading. All right. But before that, what have you folks been up to in the last 2 weeks in shooting? Crazy.
So, yeah, there's some good shit. So you guys remember that 380 I had that I didn't like and I was trying to get rid of it? Well, I finally got rid of it. And I got this instead on trade. So this is a Mossberg 590 Mariner, 20-inch barrel with an 8-shot capacity in the magazine there. You can see here that at some point in its history, someone did a stippling job on the grip with presumably a soldering iron and some grip tape, and it's actually not that bad. It's really not it's not poorly done. You can tell it's not a professional thing, but it's not poorly done. The gun also came with an ATI collapsible stock here, and the problem is the guy who I got it from obviously got it second hand because he did not have the adapter to mount this stock to the shotgun. So I had to contact ATI themselves and buy the adapter parts for it. So yeah, there's that. Other than that, I shot my P226. Oh, I also, I'll get into that in a second. I shot my P226. I took those 3 mags that I think I mentioned last time were being problematic, and I tried to run 10 reload cycles through them to break them in, and they didn't really break in. So I emailed Corwin Arms, who has fantastic customer service, and I don't remember the guy's name who runs it. I think he's Russian or something, but he just like, send me your shipping address. I'll send you 2 more magazines for free. And I'm like, okay, like, sure. I got no problem with that. Like he always, he's got really good customer service there, and that's why I know I wouldn't hesitate to buy from them again. Like I bought my lever action shotgun from them, and I had a question because like their website advertised it came with an improved cylinder or a modified and an improved modified choke, and I got a cylinder, a mod, and a full, and I thought that's even better. But I asked, I'm like, hey, is this what it's supposed to come with? And he's just like, send me your shipping address. I'll send you more chokes. And I'm like, okay, I didn't even need that, but whatever. Another thing I bought was I bought those Aguila Colibri 22s, those super quiet ones. They're hilarious. They're so funny. They're so quiet.
Can you tell people what they are?
They're a 22 with a 20 grain little bullet in it that basically is propelled by the primer. They shoot 460 feet per second, so they're actually slower than a pellet rifle. They don't make any fucking noise. I took my ear protection off. I could only load them one at a time. They won't feed out of the magazine in my SIG. Not that it's going to cycle, but they weren't feeding in general. So I pop them in one at a time in the 22 kit, close the slide, and then and it was so funny. I also bought the Aguila 60 grain ones, which is a really ridiculously long, heavy 60 grain bullet in a 22 short casing. It fires about 960 feet per second. It cycled my SIG, which was surprising. But they recommend you shoot those in something with a 20-inch barrel at least because it was keyholing, which is not surprising out of the pistol there. They're a 60 grain 22 bullet. But yeah. Other than that, as you can probably tell, I shaved and got a haircut.
Good. Is that it?
Yeah, that's it. It's all I can really think of.
Excellent. Hey, Janner.
Yeah.
What have you been up to?
What did I do the last 2 weeks? I went to Milo for a CQB clinic. That was a lot of fun. So what they're trying to do, there are CQB matches, as I understand it, in BC, Saskatchewan, Ontario, maybe Manitoba, but now they're trying to get it started up in Alberta. So this was a 2-day clinic on the stages they shoot. how to shoot them, how to do it safely, that kind of thing. It was a lot of fun. I had a blast. The first CQB match is this Saturday, and I'm not going because it's also 3-gun. And as much as I thought the CQB was fun, 3-gun is funner, in my opinion. But I would like to try to get down to a few matches. We're going to run 5 this year. So it was really fun. That Dillon 650 that arrived, I've got that all tuned up and running. I've cranked out a couple thousand rounds of 9mm on it already, and I really, really like it. I have not had any hiccups. My Lee, I would have been lucky to have 100 done by now and have a whole bunch of stuff broken and me upset. So that's great. Last Friday, I went up north and I took a pistol class with Burton Tactical, just one-on-one. I thought I'd try it out, and boy, that guy is a good teacher. I can't recommend it enough. He showed me a few things that I wasn't aware of, and we started the morning with fundamentals, just as a recap, and then in the afternoon, we worked on stressed shooting, something we do in competition, and you'll hear lots of guys say this. You've got the best stage plan, and you've got the best form and technique in the world until that buzzer goes off, and then you're a moron. So that's kind of what I was working on. So he had some very interesting techniques to get me stressed out. But we worked on shooting under stress, and it was a lot of fun. So I've been going to the range a couple times since then just to work on cementing what we've learned, and I might go hit him up in another couple months to build on that. Oh, what else? I bought a JR carbine last weekend in 9mm. That thing is a lot of fun.
Show it to us.
It's in the safe, actually.
God damn it.
I got the Mariner finish. I like it. The only bad thing maybe I can say about it is they are filthy when they run. I've tried a few different kinds of 9mm, and I guess part of it maybe is just the blowback action, but holy cow, do they get dirty fast. Luckily, it's a Mariner finish, so I can just throw it in the dishwasher. And I mean, I haven't actually done that, but I was looking at that and going, there's really no reason why I can't. So I swapped out. A lot of the parts are compatible with an AR. It'll fit an AR-15 trigger pack, but actually the trigger on it is not that bad. But I did change out. It came with an M4 collapsible buttstock, which I do not like, but I had a CTR buttstock kicking around, so I put that on instead. I put a QD mount on the end plate just so you can put a single point sling on it easily. And I think I'm probably going to lose the muzzle brake. It's just, it's there for show. It's not necessary. It looks like an A2 birdcage, except there's slots all the way around it, 180 degrees. So it's literally just to make racket. But even with that on, I did try a few magazines without hearing protection in. And with that 18.5-inch barrel, 9mm, she's no louder than a 17 HMR. So I'll probably still wear earplugs just because prolonged shooting could lead up to damage, but it's going to be a fun little gopher gun. Other than that, yeah, like I said, I got.
You're going to hit the gophers with 9mm?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
That's going to be
great. Give it a try. I wasn't sure what optic to put on it, but I've just got a little reflex sight on it now, and it seems to be as accurate as I am, out to 100 yards. I haven't taken it any further than that, and really with a pistol caliber, I don't think there's much sense in going much further than that. But I like it. I like it a lot. Other than that, 3-gun this weekend, so I've just been practicing and gearing up and getting ready to burn down some stages. How about you, Grover?
Oh, my. Well, I haven't done much, but what I have done is fun. I went down to a local Canadian Tire and sniffed around the reloading cabinet they had, and I found, you know how it is, you go there if you're a reloader and you look at what's available, and you just look and look and look, and you look at different sites and websites and people that have cooked up different things, and you find if anybody's ever shot any of the powders that they have for sale out of the guns that you have in the calibers that you are loading. And there were some powders there. I found myself 2 1-pound jugs of Winchester 231, which is an exclusively pistol powder, it seems, from the documentation that I found. Nobody's put that in a rifle. Maybe Jenner can tell us why that's a bad idea to put a pistol powder in a rifle, or vice versa. And yeah, I'm excited to say that I'll be cranking out some interesting loads. It's interesting. All the load data that I'm used to, there's barely any room to play with the charges. usually like within 1 grain. So you get to fiddle around with 0.1 of a grain at a time. But it seems that this 231 Winchester, you got several grains worth of room to play with. If I recall correctly, I think my 44 Magnum can be loaded from, don't quote me on this, but it's in the single digits all the way up to like 14 grains of the powder. So there's at least 4 grains worth of powder with room to play with, which should be fun. And speaking of hot loads, I took the the fiance out to the range on Saturday and got her shooting the 357 Magnum loaded with Mousepart 38 special loads, which is a very, very reasonable thing to do. Please, please, people, make this a public safety announcement. Don't give your significant other of the meeker sex with issues holding on to fast traveling objects. A big old gun with lots of recoil. That's just the one-way avenue to not ever having your significant other at the range again. I gotta say, she had a blast shooting the 38 specials Mousepart loads. I think, if I recall correctly, there was like 4.5 grains of tight group in there, or like 3.8 grains of tight group. It's a stupid little load. And plus, out of the 8-inch barrel on the 357, she said that it was more comfortable to shoot that than it was to shoot a 22 1911 that she got to shoot mere minutes, courtesy of another Redditor that came out to shoot with me. There was also a partial range trip with other Redditors. 2 of the guys that I usually shoot with out in Victoria Fishing Game were there. And we all had a blast shooting. I also got to try out 2 different hot and spicy loads out of the 44 Magnum. The first one was 9 grains of 700X under 240 grain lead semi-wad cutters. And that one was a stumper. That one kicked quite a bit, made lots and lots of smoke. So, okay. But then the fun one, I loaded 23 grains of H110 in the 44 Magnum under 240 grain full copper plated Campro bullets. And holy fuck, that was awesome. That is the best load that I've cooked up so far. It is got lots of energy, and Janitor probably is more familiar with the mechanics of it all. But the way that that load burns, it just does this. Pop! Straight up. I don't know why. I felt like there was almost no recoil. But it was just like the recoil was completely redirected, moving up. I didn't feel it going into my hand. And I love that, because up to this point, I had been worried about those super spicy H110 loads, because apparently the projectiles are booking it at like 1,400 feet per second. So those fuckers are going down range. I shot my target stand and I promptly knocked it over with 1 shot of that load. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. Janitor, care to interject as to why I felt that load was so different?
Sure. So you're using an actual Magnum powder when you're using H110. So what that means is it's a little bit slower burning, but if you look at Magnum cases as a generalization, they're generally large cases. So something like tight group, I've got, and I can post it up somewhere later if people want, but they have burn rate charts basically, and it compares all the powders on the market, one after the other, what burns the fastest to the slowest. Magnum powders are generally slower, which is why you also want Magnum primers, which are generally hotter. But if you remember back to your physics, force is acceleration and time, right? So something quick burning like a tight group, it's a quick, sharp pressure spike, and that's where you get that real smack or flipperosity, if you will. Whereas the slower burn time on that Magnum powder that you're doing, if you load it up in quick loads, I know just waving fingers doesn't mean much, but you know, if we've got a tight little spike like that when you set off your tight group, your Magnum powders are going to look like that. So the force is just spread out over time. So that's partially why you're not seeing that smack into your hand and why it's coming up more. But also it's more efficient too. You're basically utilizing that whole barrel, that whole case capacity. I mean, you use that pressure, well, necessary. We can do powder efficiency calculations to see if you're burning it all before it leaves the barrel. But basically, you're just spreading out that pressure spike over time. So yeah, easier on the hands just because it's taking slightly longer to burn.
And that's why, folks, I'm in love with that load.
So how many times did you smack yourself in the forehead with the front sight of your gun when it was firing?
See, I am sensible, and I single loaded first, and then I tried to shoot more than one round in the cylinder because I would hate to smack myself in the face with that fucking iron. Yeah, it's got a nice pointy fucking front sight post, so I don't want that embedded in my forehead. Other than that, folks, is there anything that you'd like to touch on before we jump onto our main topic today?
I could do the gun milsurp thing before we touch on the main topic.
Let's do that.
So, actually, my washing machine's about to go off in 3 minutes, so if you want to start on something, we can do that afterwards because I'm just going to get stopped by the washing machine here. Sorry about that.
This is not fucking amateur hour, man. Come on.
Sorry, I just kind of looked over and went, oh, 3 minutes. Fuck.
Yeah. Okay, fine. Let's go over proper reloading, folks. Now, before we get started, take all of what we're going to say and the stuff we said before with a grain of salt. This may not work for you, and this may lead to injury, so don't do it the way that we are. Look at other resources. Triple, quadruple, quintuple check everything, because that's how you don't blow yourself up while reloading. All right? Everybody heard that? Did you guys hear that so that I know if everybody else heard that?
Yes.
I heard it, yes.
All right. What do you do first? Well, you get yourself some brass. Either in a little bag or in a little box. Usually the stuff in the bag you buy at gun shows, you buy from your buddy, you find at the range in the brass bucket. Problems with that are you don't know what's happened to that brass. It could be pristine virgin brass that's been shot, that was factory brass a mere minutes ago, or it could be some old shit that Janner or I have shot a bunch of times, and it shows signs of wear that we have identified and have chosen to get rid of. But if you go ahead and pick it up from the range bucket, you may not see that. So if it says once fired, take that with a grain of salt. If it comes brand new from a box, it's brand new brass. However, janitor, why don't you like Hornady brass?
One, it's kind of crappy, but two, I reload a lot of 4570. You know, people say you don't get into reloading to shoot money, you just shoot more for the same amount of money. That's true to a point, but 4570 is fracking expensive. Now, Hornady, in all their wisdom, came out with something called the Lever Evolution Bullet, which has a polymer tip on it. So it's pointy and it's like a ballistic tip and it shreds a big hole and everything. It's also soft, so it can run in a tubular magazine without setting off your whole magazine. But to accommodate that bullet, it's a good, I'll bet you it's over 1/8 of an inch shorter than all the other 4570 brass, and I fucking hate it. I've got a whole bunch here if somebody wants to buy it for cheap because it pisses me off.
Yes. Also, there are differences in brass within the same caliber. Janitor, you reload 45 ACP, don't you?
I sure do.
Which is the kind of 45 ACP brass that you fucking hate?
Small primer pocket. So
that's right.
45 ACP always had a large primer pocket, and then some bean counter somewhere figured out, hey, we can put small primers in these. And that's fine as long as you're not using a progressive press and get them screwed up and you try to ram, well, a small primer into a big hole just isn't going to stay in there. But you can go the alternate way, guys. Some guys do like the small primer pocket.
Less things to keep track of. If you only have small primer pockets.
You try to ram a big one into a little hole and it explodes in your face. And that's fun too. So yeah, check your 45 ACP brass for sure.
So yeah, as you can see, folks, we haven't even begun reloading, and we're talking about stuff that can happen to you even just gathering the supplies for reloading. So you have your brass. What do you do after? You get rid of the old primer, or you don't. What's the difference, Janner? Where would you go different there?
It really depends on your cleaning methodology. So personally, I like to tumble my brass in dry media before I decap it. A couple reasons for that. One, I don't want to get dirt and bullshit and whatever came off the range floor that might be all over that brass up inside my die. That might wear it out quicker. Two, I don't like cleaning out flash holes. I use corn cob, and if you decap those after, yes, it can kind of clean up the primer pocket a little bit, get the soot out of there, that kind of thing. But it can also fill your flash hole with media, which then, if you don't catch it, if you don't look at every single kind of brass, could affect the ignition of that primer through that flash hole, and could create a squib, could create a hang fire. Maybe it'll just burn out. I don't know. I like my face and my fingers, so I don't want to find out.
See, that's where we run into our first differences today, folks. I deprime before I chuck my brass into my tumbler, which a friend of mine graciously borrowed, and then I just got a call last night saying that the lid came off when he was tumbling, and he spread all his tumbling media and cases all over the place, and there was a fine layer of corn cob and shit all over his storage compartment.
Awesome.
Yeah, and the leaf wing nut stripped the bit that you screw it on, so it's a dead tumbler now, and I'm going to take it to Canadian Tire tomorrow, hopefully, and get a new one. But yes, I also tumble my brass. There is other ways of cleaning your brass. Crazy, you have some fucking weird-ass way of cleaning your brass, don't you?
Not anymore. I bought a tumbler.
Can you tell us what that weird fucking way was?
Okay, so for the sake of what I did the first time, is because I was a cheap bastard and didn't want to buy a tumbler, I took my 8mm brass and some of my dad's 303. I threw it into a bin, filled it with water and vinegar and some soap, and just let it kind of soak and swished it around a bit. And then I had to let it dry for fucking ever, and I'm even still not entirely positive if it was dry enough. So I'm left to wonder if my powder is not going to burn properly when I go and shoot those rounds. And until I go and replace the front side of my Mauser, I'm not going to find out. But yeah, basically, I realized after doing this, it doesn't clean the brass at all. Like, when I was resizing the brass, there were fine rings of carbon right around the neck and right around the base where it had pushed carbon that had not been cleaned to certain points on the brass. And when I was wiping the very limited amount of case lube that was actually on these cases off, I was more so actually just wiping these carbon rings off of these 2 points on the cases. So basically washing my brass did fucking nothing to clean it. So that's why I bought a tumbler, and that made a huge amount of difference. It actually cleans the cases and makes them look nice and shiny. Now, there are some things, like if the brass is tarnished, I know you can get brass polished. I'm not really sure how well it works, but I know I got some 223 that I picked up on the range and just threw into the tumbler, still somewhat wet even, figuring it'll dry out as it tumbles. And some of it is fairly tarnished, and that tarnishing did not go away with tumbling.
What are you using for media in your tumbler?
Walnut, crushed walnut. It was suggested with the purchase on Amazon. I know there's corn cob, and I know there's also you can get fine steel balls as well.
Yep. You can use. So I was just curious. Walnut is more aggressive, so I would have thought that would have helped. The other thing I would recommend, if you haven't done it already, is throw like a cap full of new wax, new finish car wax, in with your media before you put the brass in. Let it run for like half an hour to get that polish spread all over your media, and that will make your brass shiny and smell like a car.
That would be fine if I cared about the brass being shiny. I just kind of want it to not have crap on it so it doesn't leave crap on my press when I do things. That was all I cared about.
Yeah. There's also other methods of cleaning your brass. You can use wet tumbling. I have no idea how that works, and I wish Kleeman was here because I think he wet tumbles.
And I know there's sonic cleaners as well.
Yeah, there's sonic cleaners.
The wet tumbling uses Dawn and Lemmy Shine along with water and stainless steel pins. So the nice part about that is a lot of guys that do want their flash holes cleaned out, the stainless steel pins generally don't get jammed in the hole as easily. So it'll clean those right out. And it does. It makes your brass look like jewelry. The flip side of that is you have to dry your brass afterwards, which kind of sucks. And if you don't do it right, you can get a little bit of that bullshit film on it later. So I actually know guys that do both. They'll hit stainless first, and then they'll do it later with the corn cob and the car wax, like I talked about. And then their brass looks like jewelry, which is cool. But I went to the range today for a quick little 45-minute practice session and I blew through 200 rounds. I don't care if it looks like jewelry. No. The flip side of that is it's easier to find in the grass if it's shiny. So there is an argument to be made there.
Interesting.
But, yeah.
And shooting 45, you look for your brass.
Oh, yes. I'm very cranky if I don't find 45 brass.
I might just sell you my shoebox full of 45 brass. Gives me a reason not to buy a 45.
I might be interested.
This summer, coming to you from Victoria, a box full of brass. That'd be nice. So yes, at this point in the reloading process, you have just gotten your brass cleaned. And this is what it looks like out of the tumbler that I use. It's shiny, just like Crazy said, sometimes it is still tarnished, but more often than not, unless you are picking up wet brass and leaving it wet, then most of my cases are clean when they come out and they look good. I mean, you can tell if you look closely that they're once fire brass. And as Janner was talking about, it's kind of hard to see, but yeah, this camera fucking sucks. Come on. Yeah, you can't really. Is it? No. But yeah, basically, the primer pocket is somewhat cleaned up by mine. So that's good. And what do you do at this point? It's up to you. If you had deprime before, you could have done depriming and resizing at the same time, because some dyes let you just do that. For example, this is my Carbide RCBS 35738 special die. This, as you can see, has the doohickey for depriming, but this is also a resizer. However, in the event that you don't want to get your dies dirty, just like Janner, you do have the option of getting an exclusive deprimer die. That's a Lee depriming die, and it is just that. It's just the deprimer portion of the die. There is no resizing, and this is a universal depriming tool, which means that no matter what the caliber, is that crooked? No, whatever. No matter what the primer, no matter what the case, as long as you adjust it to the right height, you're golden. So you have now gotten some brass, and you want to prime it. This is your friend. This is an RCBS priming tool. You put your primers on this little tray. Usually, they come in itty-bitty little thingies like this. These are the primers for my Magnum 357 loads, not for the 30 special or for the 44 ones. The 44 uses a large pistol Magnum primer. Okay, they're just bigger in terms of diameter, and they withstand different pressures too. That's the difference between Magnum and non-Magnum primers. as far as I understand. Anybody care to corroborate?
You said they burn hotter too, right?
Not that, but yes, they also burn hotter. Hey, look at that. Elixir is here. Hey, douchebag.
So,
We can't
Crover.
hear you, by the way.
There we go. Okay.
Ah, that makes more sense.
So, Crover, how do people hold their rounds in the reloading setup?
Yes.
Why did you ask Crover?
Well, I had bought secondhand 44 Magnum and 44 Special dice. Actually, they're right up there next to my pineapple. And they came with a shell holder. However, it was a Lee shell holder, which is just barely a little bit longer than the RCBS shell holder. So when I tried to put it on the RCBS tool, the Lee shell holder would not fit. It did, however, fit in the press. So that was a fun little conundrum that I was faced with, which resulted in me just going to the shop and buying the fucking RCBS shell holder. Yes. You do need a shell holder. When I bought my press, I promptly set it up and I was ready to load, and then I found out that there's another part that you need. So, yes, that is another part of reloading. You will be surprised by how many parts you end up having to buy and by how many parts you still haven't used from your kit. I have some shit that I don't know what it does, and I have it in a box. And yeah, that's life. So you've primed your brass, and there is some stuff that you gotta watch for. Hey, Elixir,
Hi.
what about priming is kind of hard?
What?
How do you prime your shit?
I use my press.
You use your press? What do you watch for when you're doing your press?
Depth. Mostly.
Depth? What's that mean? How does that influence things?
So then your primer isn't sticking out too far. I tried to go just below flush with the butt of the case, I guess.
And what's the problem if the primer is just ever so slightly sticking out?
You could have an out of battery detonation.
Ooh, that doesn't sound fun. And with pistols, maybe you'll get some shit going on. Maybe you'll get some funny ejection. But what happens with great big old fucking Magnum rifle cartridges and that happens to you, Elixir?
You could probably have some primer flow and have a whole lot of hot gas in your face.
Oh, yeah. So with your pistols, you might have some hot gas in your hands. With rifles, you might have hot gas in your face. And that's not fun, is it?
There's also, when you're priming, you have to make sure you've set the priming tool up correctly. I don't have mine readily accessible here, but the priming tool has a little rod inside of it. Crover, do you think you could pull that rod out of your priming tool?
Actually, I have the other rod priming rod because I just pulled out my large priming rod out of the tool, and I put in my small primer.
There's
rod.
actual different rods. So
Yep.
one side of the rod is flat, and the other side of the rod is rounded.
Yeah.
So yours is a bit different. Mine's usually a convex rounded rather than concave. Either way, when you are priming, you want to have the flat side facing up. If you do not have the flat side facing up and that round side faces up, then when you're priming, you can actually have the primer detonate as you are loading it into the case. And that
Actually, I think
happened.
yours is an old tool because they just completely got rid of that shit. This only goes in one way, and the flat side is obviously the thin part that goes up into the tool, and the bottom part is the part that makes contact with the elbow
My dad's
joint.
got an old tool as well, because the ones we have, they're both flat on the top and round on the bottom of the thing there. And if you put the round end in, you can have a detonation on the primer as it goes in. And my dad actually had that happen to him, and my mom ran down thinking that he'd shot himself.
Oh,
I've got the one Crazy's talking about. It's the RCBS. As you can see, flat right there, round right there.
Well, that's a design flaw if I ever saw one.
Yeah. The nice part is mine just drops out. I don't have to take all this bullshit apart like the new one.
Yeah, I have to take mine apart to switch out the parts. Yeah, it's okay. And You have prime brass. Yay! You have resized your brass beforehand. Yay! Now what?
Powder.
You missed
Powder.
one.
You missed one.
You missed one. What if you got military brass?
Oh.
You swage it and then throw it in the garbage.
So, what the hell did you call it?
Swaging.
Swaging for what kind of brass?
Military brass, they crimp the primer pockets in so that they can't wiggle out in machine guns or shipping or whatever. The downfall of that is there's a little lip that sits on the edge of your brass, and when you try to put in a new primer, it's either very hard to push or it goes in sideways and mashes itself. So a swager takes and knocks that little ring out and makes it like normal people brass.
That's something that I have to deal with if I actually ever get around to fucking reloading 223. I have 1,000 rounds of 223 federal brass that is for some reason squished, with the in the primer pocket.
A lot of
So it's
223
not
brass
5.56.
is-
It's not 5.56. It's 223 brass, but it's
That's
got
very interesting.
the thing.
Yeah, you'll see that lots, and sometimes you'll see it on 9mm. I mean, you'll see it on just about any cartridge under the sun, but 223 5.56 is the very common one.
We got surplus 303 brass. It's on as well.
Yeah.
Same as 308.
Yeah, I've seen it on 9mm. I've seen it on some 45 even. Yeah, just depends on where that brass came from and what that contract was at that factory and what their tooling was set up for.
Yep. So I had to deal with that, and I had to go and buy yet another part that wasn't included on the kit. And I have yet to use it. I have it. It's in there. It's in one of those little boxes. And yes, that's more shit that you have to store. I have in my living room actually a garage cabinet that I put together from Crappy Tire. Works very well actually. And after all that, you have primed your brass. What do you do if you have a straight wall pistol cartridge that you don't do with some rifle stuff?
Pray to God.
We have to do yet another step. Shit. We have to flare the mouth of the brass to accept the projectile, which is what I'm going to do today right now. Right, because I have what to do.
Now, can it not size and flare at the same time?
No. I don't know. I haven't ever seen that kind of die. Jenner?
Pistol, it's generally 2 separate stages.
So is that why pistol tends to come with 4 die sets, a deep prime size, a flare, a seat, and a crimp?
Correct.
I am missing a stupid little fucking tool. Let's see if that's the right size, though. But yes, you have to flare the mouth of your brass so that you can accept the projectile and make sure that it goes in. Because if you don't, then it's just gonna be sitting on top of the brass and you're not gonna be able to push it in. Is that correct?
Couldn't you also shave your bullets by doing that?
Yes, you can also shave your bullets if you're not careful enough. Excellent. I'm going to do one of those now. So I have here primed 357 brass. I'm going to put it into my press, and I'm going to run it up, and I'm going to run down the little bit at the top of the die until I feel it touch. And I'm going to go down and check to see how much flaring there is. This is really, really something you got to take your time with. You're not going to be doing this quickly because too much mouth flaring does what, Jenner?
You're just working the brass unnecessarily, and also that bullet might drop in way further than you wanted it to, which in that case, you'll have to run it through your sizer again, push it back in, and every time you work that brass, you take a little bit of life out of it.
Now, there is something we missed, which is lubricating brass when we were talking about sizing, which is something, because Crover primarily does pistol, it's something he doesn't have to worry about. Straight wall cartridges usually don't need to be lubricated. Instead, what they do is they make the dies out of a specific form of steel called carbide steel. which generally tends to be more, I guess, slippery than standard steel. So you don't need to worry about lubricating your rounds before putting them in there. Anything with a bottleneck, or anytime you're running things through just a normal steel die set, you will need to lubricate your rounds, or else they could get stuck, because you do subject a lot of force onto the casing there with it there, and it can actually go and seize up in there if it's not lubricated, and then you go and have to spend some time disassembling your die, punching the brass out, ruining your brass.
Or you get a stuck case remover kit, which is another thing that I had to buy. Not because I've had a piece of brass stuck in my die, but because I know I will at some point.
And
hey, Elixir, have you gotten anything stuck in your dies before?
No.
All right, you're perfect. You've never fucked up, right?
I can tell you with loading my 8 mil, I did not lubricate it very much, I've come to learn. And when I was going off, you put effort in on going up, and you're supposed to just go down and it releases. Going down, I had to go and brace myself and push the fucking brass out of my thing.
I'm surprised you didn't just rip the brass in half.
Yeah, it stayed intact, thankfully, and it's partially because when you do rifle brass or any bottleneck brass, it doesn't just size the outside. In order to size the neck area there, it actually pushes something in and out. And then when you release it, you got to pull it up the tube there. So when you're lubricating, you don't just lubricate the outside. You also got to lubricate the inside a little bit, because something goes down into your brass. And that's also why cleaning is so important, is because if you don't clean the inside of your brass too, then the inside of your brass is all nice and disgusting and dirty and shit too. And tumbling helps clean everywhere on the brass.
So I have now found the right amount of mount flaring for me, for my projectile. How much is that? I barely flared the brass enough to accept the projectile.
Move it up a bit. Your lower third's in the way.
Okay. Yeah. Just barely flared it enough for the projectile to sit in the mouth of the case. I have heard many different people say that how much mount flaring you should do. I try to do as little as possible so that the projectile remains upright and just barely sitting inside of the brass. Barely. How much do you do, Jenner?
I do half again less than what you just did there.
Half less?
I watched you put it. Yeah, I just want it so it just barely starts. Yeah, I do hardly any at all, which might be the reason you need a heavier crimp than I do. I might have more neck tension.
Now, you don't flare rifle brass traditionally, right?
That's right. That's that piece you were talking about that goes in down inside. That's your expander ball. That does that in that full length resizing step.
Backing it up just a little bit to see.
There's a thing in the die that does it. I didn't know the technical name for what the part was, but yeah.
But that's the reason why. So a rifle size, because it's got that shoulder to work against, when you pull back out that ball, it will give you that little bit of expansion that you need.
All right, so we have now sized the brass. What's next, boys? I mean, flare the neck. What do we do next?
Charge.
Hey, Elixir, how much charging or how much attention do you pay to your charging?
I'm standing there, so yeah. I'm just.
And you do it a little differently, right? Because you're doing precision rifle stuff, right?
I just use a auto dispenser with an electric scale attached to it. So no bullshit powder tricklers and throwers.
And is your powder dispenser, is it accurate enough to give you, say, 71.1, or do you throw it to, say, 71 and trickle up the last 0.1 of a grain?
It trickles itself, so I don't have to actually.
Generally, doesn't overshoot with like, let's say you were using Vargan or something. Does it ever wander on you, or is it pretty decent?
Most times it's 0.1 under, and then then I can just push a button on it to trickle it a little bit more.
What brand is that you're running?
It's the Lyman Gen 5, I think.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
No, that just dispenses things in like a little cup, basically.
It has a little tray.
Yeah. So what do you do to get it into your actual casing then after you've got it out there?
I have a funnel for all my brass. And then, of course, I use loading blocks as well.
As soon as I am done, as soon as I'm done flaring the mounts of these brass, I'm going to be doing a bit of powder measuring. I'm going to figure out the charge that I'm going to use. And to do that, hey, Jenner, how many resources do you consult before you actually find a charge?
You should at least compare against 2, especially if you're going to the high end of things. So generally, you never start with a high end load. If you look, there's generally, depending on the manual, definitely a min and a max, and sometimes a third that they claim that they found the best accuracy at. You never start at the highest. If you do want to start there, they always recommend you back off 10%. But yes, there is misprints in manuals from time to time. So you want to confirm against 2 manuals. There's also programs like QuickLoad that can show you some other numbers based on SAMI specs. Or HodgdonReloading.com is actually an excellent resource too. They carry a lot more powders than just their own. So generally for me, I look at my Spears manual.
Hodgdon and IMR.
Yeah, I look at my my Spears manual, my Hodgdon manual, the Hodgdon website, and then I'll run it through QuickLoad as well. Again, we talked about this. I like my face and my fingers where they are. So
there's also the Vita Viore powders. They have their own shit, all basically just for Lapua bullets itself. So
you got fancy Swedish Vita Viore powder and fancy Swedish or Finnish, who are the fuck country Lapua brass.
Yep,
pretty much.
Only the fanciest. Only the fanciest, most spicy shits, right?
Yeah. Well, mostly just the Lapua brass, but.
Now, why would you spend more on Lapua brass versus, say, just picking up some Winchester brass at the range?
Well, if you're picking up range brass, you never know how many times it's actually been shot because
Well, we covered
There's
that.
people like us that are on their
like,
3rd generation of brass usage.
Yeah, but let's say that you have your buddy just bought some Winchester factory loads and the caliber that you have and you reload for. Why would you want to buy Lapua brand brass rather than pick up his Winchester brass at the range?
I mean, if you're doing for precision reloading, you want generally to go with either Norma or Lapua brass, mostly because they're the most consistent, and then Lapua has a thicker neck wall, I guess, which because for most of the precision guys, they're going to be doing neck sizing only, and then you can turn down your necks and then get the neck tension exactly the same on all your brass. But if you're just doing plinking and shit like that, brass doesn't really matter. So
another point to the Lapua brass, and this gets down to when we're talking long distance, ultra precision, guys will sort their brass based on case capacity. So they will fill it up with water, and they will find variations just from the machining process, but they will sort these 10 rounds all have the exact same case capacity within plus or minus 0.1 of a grain, and so on. So the name of accuracy and precision is basically repeatability is what we're looking for. So if you know all your cases are the same size, have the same case capacity, that's just helping you be that much more repeatable. So that, and yeah, like Elixir said, it's generally better brass, it'll last longer, and it's generally more durable.
I don't care about that shit.
Neither do I.
Fucking pistol guys. God damn it.
Yes, I don't care about that at all. I have range pickup brass. Actually, I have in my bag here, I have some 38 specials I found at the range like 2 weeks ago. It looked brand new. I'm going to assume it was brand new. There was no signs of it being anything otherwise than that. You know how I know that? Because there was a box of factory brass that matched the brass that I found. So I'm assuming that it's new. I have also amassed several hundred different pieces of brass from a couple of different manufacturers from when I used to own a lever action 357 rifle. I kept all my brass because I knew at some point I was going to be making my own shit, and I saved myself a buttload of money because I have like 700 pieces of brass that I don't have to worry about. When I bought my 44 Magnum, I did not feel like paying 60 to 100 bucks for 50 rounds of factory ammo. Instead, I bought a box of 100 pieces of brass for 70 bucks. Then I am now in my second generation, so that brass is significantly cheaper than a round. And if I reload it 5 more times, it will be dirt cheap compared to factory brass. I mean, factory ammo.
See, the thing I have with that is I'd still end up buying the 2 packs of factory ammo myself, because then I can go out and shoot it immediately, and then I still have the brass. Like if brass was like 40 bucks for 100, I could see, but at 70 bucks for 100, that's pretty expensive.
Yeah, I didn't feel like paying for the factory ammo, and plus I would only have gotten 50 versus 100 pieces of brass.
Yeah.
So that's just the mental gymnastics you do when you're reloading.
With the brass that you find that you picked up, did you trim it all to the same height, or did you find it was already relatively consistent?
It's pistol. So yes, speaking about that, there's actually another step that we kind of missed. Trimming. What's that?
I don't know. I didn't do it.
Hey, rifle guys, what's trimming?
So with a shouldered case, generally, I've never seen it on a straight wall case, although it could happen. With a shouldered case, you have a restriction where your bullet's coming out. That pressure spike we were talking about actually stretches the brass out a little bit every time it fires. Eventually, it gets too long to chamber properly. You'll be driving the case mouth right up into your lands, or if it headspace is on the rim or the belt or something like that, it's just not going to fit in your gun. So if you look at there's SAMI diagrams for all of your cartridges, it's also in your reloading manuals, they have maximum lengths. So back to the consistency thing, you want them all to be the same length. Otherwise, you're going to have different seating depths, different distances from your projectile off the rifling. But also, rifle too. Like we haven't touched on pressure. Handguns are generally somewhere in the neighborhood of 10,000 to 15,000 PSI. Rifles, 60, 70, even 80 is not unheard of. So there's just a lot more going on, and it really beats the shit out of your brass, stretches it out. So we want it to be the same, and we want it to fit in our rifle is the short answer. Just
in my experience, sometimes different companies have different lengths for the brass, just as a default in general. I had, for 8mm, I had Cellian Balat and Winchester as the 2 brands of brass. And I actually found the Winchester brass was slightly shorter than the Cellian Balat brass, and actually went through my dies easier than the Cellian Balat brass when resizing. But I noticed when I was seating the bullets, that's when I actually noticed, is because I could see more of the cannelure on the bullet after I seated it in the Winchester brass than I could on the Cellian Balat brass, which I had set my my reloading setup for. So that's how I noticed that they're actually 2 different sizes, so the Cellian Balat being slightly, just a little bit longer. Now, it's probably not going to make much of a difference for me because I didn't crimp them, but that actually becomes a problem if you crimp, because you want everything to be all the same height if you crimp, because I don't know exactly why, but Janitor probably does.
Even if you don't crimp, you have varying neck tension on those rounds now. So your point of impact is going to be different, as is your velocity, as is your distance from the rifling. And just anecdotally, in my experience, Winchester brass is generally very soft. Any Winchester brass I've ever played with goes through my dies like butter. I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing, just something I've noticed.
With me, this is just going to be plinking ammo for 8mm, so as long as it hits the same general vicinity, like it's going through a Mauser, it's not going through a precision rifle. The fact that I could hit a 3-inch group with this is astounding in and of itself.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. I'm just saying, like that's back to, if we're reloading for precision, every variable needs to be the same.
Yeah, with plinking, it really doesn't. I mean, with this stuff, what you talked about checking SAMI specs. Now there's lengths. There's actually minimum lengths as well. And with the 170 grain 8mm bullet, it's so short. I was not checking whether it meant maximum length. I was checking if it meant minimum length. I would actually set it to the minimum spec. It would tell me for overall length on SAMI's specifications and touch the brass to it. And I was literally like 2 millimeters over SAMI's minimum spec for 8mm Mauser.
Yeah. Well, and that's when you look, they generally give a range, right? They'll have an upper and a lower range, and as long as you're in it, that's fine. To the trimming point, we generally trim, well, I shouldn't say we, I generally trim to the maximum length, just because I don't want to use up my brass any faster than I have to. It means I trim a little more often, but I'm taking less off each time.
Now, what if, would you trim, like in the case where I have two different lengths of brass, would you trim the Sellian Ballot down to the Winchester so that when you crimp, it's a consistent crimp every time in the same place? Or would you just not?
For plinking ammo, I probably wouldn't care as long as it's all under max length. For precision ammo, I wouldn't mix head stamps.
Yeah. Now, would the difference in length affect crimpability? Because I remember reading it had to be all around the same length if you wanted to get a good crimp, or you'd be adjusting your crimp in between each casing.
It definitely will, but there's other variables at play. Back to me talking about guys casing things, sorting things by case capacity. There are guys that sort their bullets by weight as well. If you buy a box of 155 grain, let's say Sierra Match King Gold, they don't all weigh the same. There's going to be variation. Sometimes, on shitty, cheaper bullets, that's a decent bullet, but on cheaper bullets, sometimes by 5 grains, plus or minus. So there's guys that sort that way. There's also guys that sort based off the ogive. So based where that is, you're measuring where that's going to hit your rifling. I don't know. Sorry, we're going down a rabbit hole.
Yeah, staying out of the rat hole. I'm thinking mostly in concern for. I heard when you put in a semi-automatic, you're supposed to crimp because it can have problems with bullets walking out. That's what my main concern is with this. Is with different lengths like that, are you going to have concerns about the crimp not being as good on the shorter one if you've got the crimp set for the longer one, or if you're going to over crimp the longer one if you set it for the shorter one?
If you're doing a roll crimp into a cannular, it's fairly important you get it in there. If you're just doing a taper crimp into the side of a bullet without that, probably not a huge deal.
So it wouldn't matter too much if, say, the die has a built-in crimping mechanism. If I were to just, I don't know what kind of crimping it does with those kind of built-in crimping mechanisms, but if I were to just set it...
what caliber are you thinking about?
8 mil Mauser, literally it's all I reloaded. 8 mil Mauser, I got a Lyman die set, and it said it's capable of doing a crimp on the brass, and it explained how to do it, and I just said, fuck that, I'm not going to bother, it's going into bolt action. But if I wanted to crimp, would it then not matter for those slight differences in length between Winchester and Sellian Ballot if I set it, say, for the Sellian Ballot ammo?
The truth of the matter is you set your crimp every time you do a new projectile, right? You can adjust where that crimp is and how hard it is. So you would just accommodate accordingly.
Yep. There's also another issue with crimping that stems from pistols, and specifically Magnum pistols. And I had to deal with this to the point where I had to buy more shit to deal with it. With your big honking hunks of metal in your 44 Magnum, if you don't tighten down on that fucking projectile and you have some nice stout recoil, the projectile will remain static for a little bit longer than the case and the rest of the gun, which means that in a cylinder with 6 rounds, the last round might have walked out, lengthened. And if you do that enough, and if it does that enough, it might jam the mechanism, and then you have a gun with live projectiles that you cannot unload. Isn't that right, janitor?
Correct.
How do you deal with that? How did I have to deal with that, janitor?
I don't know what you did. I've never ran into that issue, but
what did I end up buying? What did I buy that you were like,
oh, yes, get a factory crimp die.
And what did that solve?
It put a really nice crimp, just like the factory does. There's no guesswork. There's no feel. It just does it.
That's right. And just for those people that are curious what the hell I'm doing with all that clanking is, I am measuring my powders right now. Yes, this is not something that you do quickly. Take your time, because for this particular load, for these particular projectiles, 125 grain Hornady XTPs, the range of powders that I can do with my Hodgdon H110 is 21 grains to 22 grains. Guess where I'm starting? 21 grains. I am not going to be doing max loads. It's just not, I don't have to do that. If one of you boys with quick load wants to look up what the best possible load for Hodgdon 125 grain jacketed hollow points and H110 out of a 8 1/4 inch barrel would be, I am guessing Hodgdon is not that far off from that suggestion between 21 and 22 grains. But yes, what I've been doing so far while those guys find out what the hell the thing is I set up my powder thrower. It's that
You
thing.
said H110?
H110, yes.
How
That
many grain? Bullet?
125 grains.
125 grain out of a 44 Magnum?
357 Magnum.
Okay. Okay.
This doohickey has got a little dial that you can move in and out to change how much powder it's going to throw. I only loaded a little bit.
Are you using the same dial as the one for rifle? Because mine, it says you're supposed to be able to swap the dials, and I have no idea how to swap the dials.
I don't know. Maybe yours is an old one. It's just the same thing. It just basically moves a plunger and a screw in and out of the body there.
From what I remember hearing with RCBS, they have a small one and a large one. The small ones for when you get into like handgun with more precise measurements, and the large ones for
this
rifle.
is precision. You just turn it like a cunt hair, boop, 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 and then you're good to go. And that's what I've been doing. I've been turning it just a little bit at a time until I find that perfect amount of powder. And you know how I measure it? Using that itty bitty little scale. No, it's not for weed. It's actually an RCBS one built for this that has increments of 0.1 grains. And that's what I've been doing. I set it to 21 grains, and I've been slowly fiddling with the screw over here in the powder thrower until I am at exactly 21 grains. And once I am happy, I crank down the thing here, and I will do another 5 more powder throws to verify that it is spitting out 21 grains. Once I am happy with that, I will get out the loading block and actually start pouring powder into the case. Janitor, what am I going to do with this powder?
Spill it all over the workbench and then vacuum it up.
That's probably true. I've done that once or twice.
What powder did you say you were using again?
H110.
H110 in a 357 Magnum with a 110 grain bullet.
125.
125.
And an 8.25 inch barrel.
I am seeing that you cannot overpressure that case.
What does that mean?
It means if you go to 100% case capacity, which I'm seeing is 15.3 grains, you're going to hit 1,441 foot per second, and a fireball. End of combustion after projectile exits muzzle. You're only burning 66.57% of that powder. Pressure spike is 22,822 psi. Sammy Max is 35,000. So you got all kinds of room.
That's odd.
According to this, I might have punched something in wrong. Like we said at the beginning of the show, don't listen to anybody's bullshit. Do your own homework.
The reason that I say that's weird is because Hodgdon website has a different opinion. What Hodgdon website is saying is the following. Boop, 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 boop. There it is. It is saying H110 through 57, 125 grain projectile, 21 grains will give me 1,800 feet per second, 38,000. Is that what you said or something else?
Interesting.
The barrel length they have is 10 inches.
Yeah, and I've got 8 1/4 put in mine. What if I put it to 10? It doesn't change a whole bunch besides the velocity. Huh. Well, the other thing you can go in is both, and this is why we say don't start at maxes, work your way up. I don't understand.
What bullets were you using?
Hornadies, 125 grain.
I put Barnes in. Let me change that to Hornadies. I don't think that'll make a bunch of difference.
Who knows?
125 grain Hornady, FMJ round nose,
No.
XTP.
XTP, jacketed hollow point.
XTP jacketed hollow point. Oh, if anything, that reduced our pressure. Weird.
Weird.
Oh, but I had also changed my case
I'm using
capacity.
target. Whoops.
Okay, so now, see, it's
There we
telling
go.
me that 100% fill is 18.4 grains, and Hodgson is saying you can put in 20-something. Well, I mean, you can compress
Here we
that.
go.
That sucks.
21 grain is 109.8 fill, and you're at 43,000 psi.
That's more in line with what this said.
And then what was that? 22.
Yeah.
22 would be over max CIP pressure, which is the European measurement.
Oh, yeah. See, I was looking at Sammy, which shouldn't change it. Oh, what the? I think there's an issue with quick loads because I just switched from Sammy to CIP. That changed things quite a bit.
Oh, CIP has a different way of measuring pressure.
Yeah.
So for the main difference I know of is because for 308, CIP is just over 60,000, and then Sammy's 62,000 something, which gives you a bit of leeway, depending. But yeah, for pistol, it's, let's see.
All right, I have done my 5 measurements, and I have confirmed that the powder thrower is spitting out 21 grains.
I had the same powder thrower, and mine had a variance of 0.2 grains,
Oh.
60 or 80 rounds. 60 rounds? 60 rounds of 8 mil.
I also had it at 29-inch barrel, so. Whoops.
That makes more sense. I was wondering why your quick load was different than my quick load.
Does quick load cost a lot of money?
It's like 150 US.
Yeah.
So yes.
Yes.
You could buy a lease set for that.
But do you want to?
I've had no problems with it. Well, I mean, I'm not buying Elite Progressive. That's why I'm not making that mistake.
Ooh.
There's nothing wrong with Lee. It's good entry-level equipment. What I don't like about it is it comes with a 2-year warranty. To my knowledge, all the other brands come with lifetime warranties.
Yeah. Wonder if I can get a new powder thrower from RCBS by showing them pictures of this one that's a little rusty.
You know what? Email them. I've sent them emails that said, I'm a retard. I broke this being rammy. And they'll send me 2 replacements of whatever it might be.
Grover's video feed just went black.
Oh, says we're still live.
Yeah, so I don't know what just happened to him.
He probably tried to put those rounds together and exploded himself.
I would hope not. So, he just dropped from the call. So we're still live as far as I know, but now the host is gone.
Nice.
So
Oh, you just texted me. His computer died.
oh, that's unfortunate. So I guess we can go. He was loading powder into the things. So what do you do after you've loaded powder into the things?
Yeah, shove your bullet in there with a pair of pliers.
Then hit it with a hammer. No. So no, basically at that point, my single stage, it's on the bench, but it's not set up. Yeah, you would put the pill on top of your powder charge, and you would, if you haven't set up your seating die, you would have it backed way out Start slowly putting it in until you get your cartridge overall length, and then follow your instruction manual, because there's some interesting stuff about putting it out the back a turn, screwing down your thing, setting your crimp back and forth. Does your press have cam over? Doesn't it have cam over? It's a tough one. The instructions are pretty good. Anyone I've ever showed, we've just done it by feel.
I don't know what like any of those mean. When I loaded my 8mm, I had the thing twisted in a bunch. I had no idea about like what it would be. So I go and I pressed the 8mm bullet in, and the bullet was like shoved way the fuck into the casing. And I went, well, that's not good. So I got my bullet puller, which is another thing you have to buy because I don't think it comes with your kit comes with a bullet puller.
Nope.
And I just have an inertial bullet puller, so I go and stick it in there and start whacking it against my floor like 10 times to get the bullet out. I dumped the powder because I don't trust that bullet puller. We pulled some shit in there before, and I don't want mixing of powders. But I looked at the bullet. My dad said, "Well, if you use a bullet, if you have to pull a bullet, never use it again." But this one looks okay, and I went back, recharged the thing, and put the bullet back in, and I worked it way the hell out this time, like way the hell out, which is what you're supposed to do. You take the I have a die here that does sizing. So you take this part on the top here is what you would be doing, and you would work this way the hell out, because that's actually what seats the bullet, and you work this way the hell out beyond where you think it's really going to be, and then you start from like there, and then you go and you put the bullet in, and you see, did it seat where I want it to? No? You twist it down a bit. Did it seat where I want it to? No. You twist it down a bit more. And you keep doing that until it seats where you want it to, and that's where you leave it at that point, because now it's seating where you want it to seat.
And now you don't know where yours is.
Well, this is 223. I haven't set this up yet. My 8mm dies are in the other room, but this hasn't even been set up. I still haven't cleaned the grease off of these, and that's the whole reason I haven't done any 223s, because I've been too lazy to clean the grease off of these things.
That was exciting. My power cut out.
Through the whole building, or just your computer?
My computer. I just noticed that the charger wasn't plugged in. So I was running on battery the whole time. I guess you just went over seating?
Yeah. We figured after you died talking about powdering, we would go into the next logical step, which is seating.
Right. Makes sense. I am now loading my brass into a loading block. This is one of the ways that you can make sure that you are not going to double charge a case. Janitor, what happens when you double charge a case?
Boom!
Boom, 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 boom. So yes, there are multiple methods.
The Glock
People
explodes.
sometimes shine flashlights into their stuff. They measure a couple of times. This, that, everything. What are your methods for making sure you don't blow yourselves up, folks?
Load a rifle case, because you can't really double load a rifle case.
I've done that once, but I just spilled powder everywhere.
Janitor, you had a double load charge, or have you seen a double charge, right?
No. I've had squibs. I've had undercharges. I've never had a double.
Oh, Adriel is the one that saw the double charge.
Yeah. So generally, if it's a semi-auto, it'll shit the magazine out the bottom, blow off the hand grips, and possibly remove the slide for you.
That's good.
What was that? Who was it that saw that one guy who blew his shadow up from a double charge?
Yeah, that was Adriel.
Was it Adriel who saw that?
Yep.
I think so, yeah.
So I remember seeing that video, and the guy DQ'd because he dropped it, not because it blew up.
Oh, that was Air China Pilot had posted that video.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. The guy DQ'd on IPSC because his gun blew up, but not because his gun blew up, because he dropped the gun when it blew up.
Yep.
So can you make pew pew noises after your gun blows up and you still hold it?
Theoretically, he would have to, I guess, restart the stage with another gun, but pew bang, pew ping, pew ting. See, I'm hitting the steel. See,
there you go.
But yeah, with a pistol, it's easy to double or even triple charge some of them, depending on the powders you use. Especially like Hodgdon tight group is a really, like, I've looked at some of that, like in 3 to 7 you have like 10 grains, 11 grains or less. Like,
okay, you guys aren't kidding. This is definitely way over case capacity. It's like not quite at the top, but close.
I told you it was compressed.
And that's one way to avoid double charging, is you get a powder that will fill your case.
Yep.
If you get a faster burning powder, I guess, that doesn't fill your case, that's when you got to worry about whether you're going to double or triple charge your case. On rifle, it's not as much of a concern because rifle usually tends to be much closer to the top, to the point where if you were to double charge, it would almost always spill out. I say that as if I really know what I'm talking about, but...
Oh, you are correct.
So I am in the process now of charging my cases. I did 5 there, and what some people do is after every 5, they go and they check to see if their powder throw is still throwing out the right amount. So now I'm gonna check to see if it's still 21 grains.
So why do you not have that just on your press?
What do you mean?
Your powder throw. Why don't you just screw it into your press?
It is.
But it dangles out over the edge there. I mean, like straight into where the dies go in your press.
Oh, so you would need a powder through die for that, which Lee does. Most other manufacturers do not.
Hornady does as well.
Didn't find that. With my press, I just screw the RCBS thing through, stick my case in, bring it up, and then charge it with the RCBS thing.
I see what you mean. I thought, no, you can get dies that resize and drop powder at the same time.
Yeah, no, I was just wondering, like, some people, like, Crover does not have his screwed into his press where the die goes, like, normally.
It's saving him having to wheel a die in and out.
Yeah. I mean, I just use the other die to hold the other die in place, and it's out to the side. And I can use a loading block this way.
Yeah. To talk about the differences, I guess, between single stage and turret, since we mentioned that kind of on the pre-show, I have a turreted press, and what I did is I would screw in my seating die on one side of the turreted press and the powder throw on the other side of the turreted press. And so I would go and put the bullet in the shell holder, kind of push it up, and then charge the bullet with the powder. Then I would just twist the top of the turret around, grab the bullet, and stick it in. And that would mean that I would just stick the bullet in there. I could charge it and prime it and prep it without having to worry, because I've got the thing here and the die on the other side. I just
exactly. So how many stations do you have on your turret press?
It does have 4 stations. It's a lead turret press, so it's got 4 stations. So theoretically, I could have, it was a 2-die set. I could have had the sizing die and decapping die on one, and then the powder on the other, and then the steamer on the other if I want to do everything all at once. And then I just would be twisting whatever around, for that.
Yeah,
but,
so with a turret press, that makes perfect sense because you've got the space, right? Yeah. He's only got the 1 station, so holding it off to the side just saves him a die change. Or, wheeling that powder throw in and out. And like you said, you can't get a loading block through a rock chucker unless it's a really skinny loading block, which sort of defeats the purpose.
Yeah, no, you're really
I can crank out 50 at a time with this and be pretty sure that I can crank out 50 at a time and be pretty sure that I'm not going to blow myself up.
With the turret press, I liked it too because it was how I could be sure that like I didn't miss a step somewhere. I knew I charged it. All right, now I've charged it. Twist it around. Let's go seat the bullet. So that way I knew that it was getting from the primed cases. They were getting straight onto there and getting loaded before being even removed from the press there. So it was that kind of assurance that I've done my throw. I did kind of take it out and look at it still just to make sure there's powder in there. Then I would go and twist it around and whatever. And Kroger mentioned checking every so often. I see he just takes the dish out and puts it up there. I was actually charging into a casing and then pouring it out of the casing onto my scale.
The problem with that is that you don't know if you got all the powder that you put in the case. So that's why I do it. I usually do that. I measure and I just pour it into the case from the little dish. I've just actually decided that just adds an extra step that I don't need. I just pour the powder back into it. What?
I always just go straight out of, like, if your powder throw should have come with large and small drop tubes, and they are tapered if you look at them.
That's what I've been doing. I mean, I guess you didn't see it because I didn't look at it, but it is.
I thought you were filling every single charge into a pan and dumping into a case.
Fuck no.
That's crazy.
No, man. Granted, I shouldn't say that. If you want to be 100% sure that your powder throws are the exact same, number one, repeatability. what I'm doing right now is I bring it down and I tap it twice, and then on the upswing, I bring it up and I tap it twice. I saw an old guy doing that in a video, and I figured that it works pretty good. Also, if you absolutely want to be 100% certain that you are putting the same charge into every single case, measure every single throw. Other than that, you can. I mean, Crazy was having issues with his powder thrower because it was old and full of spider webs, and then he cleaned it out.
And then I was having so many issues.
Mine wasn't set up properly. I wasn't cranking down a little tightening knob around the screw, and that was making it so that after about 100 throws, I was getting 0.3 grains more by the end of the 100 throws. But once I crank it down, it's and I just verified it. It's spitting out the amount that I set every single time. Keep in mind, you're not going to use the same amount of setting. You're not going to use the same setting for every single powder. Powders are different. Who wants to talk about the different kinds of powder real quick? Elixir, you're muted, you idiot.
Damn it. Stickball and flake. There you go.
What's the differences?
Shapes, literally.
And how do they throw? They throw differently, don't they?
They can. So what you need to keep in mind if you want to screw with your head, your powder throw is throwing by volume. So it depends on the density of the powder, what the weight will be. So you get, if you want to argue with reloading FUDs, ask them if they measure by volume or by weight. And the answer is you're doing both. It is volume when it comes out of your throw, and it is weight as soon as you put it on your scale. So that's, to Crover's point, why powders weigh different amounts. You're just basically wheeling a cylinder in and out of a baffle with that throw. So you're just adjusting that volume. So it's totally dependent on the weight of the powder you're putting in. So the answer is both. But I've seen several guys argue until they're blue in the face about whether it's volume or weight.
Were they old and crotchety?
They sure were.
It's always the old crotchety ones, eh?
Yep.
So, folks, I have just finished getting rid of all the powder on my chute by just cycling it a whole bunch of times. And now that that's done, I am going to put a cap back on my little jug, and I am going to seat some projectiles, folks. Now, seating, you guys covered already, didn't you?
Yep, kind of. Sort of.
Some people measure with calipers every single projectile. After I set up a couple, I don't.
It's not hard. I was doing it with a bunch of them because I wasn't sure, because the bullets I was doing were really, really short for 8 mil. So I would just literally lift them up. I had the set of calipers set for the length, and I would just kind of tap them and go, yeah, it's okay. As long as they didn't go through the calipers, I knew it was fine. So I kind of tap up against the calipers. They don't fit. Okay, good. It's fine.
What's going on here? Where are you? Where are you? What the fuck is this set up for? Yes, there's a bunch of fuckery that you're gonna end up doing when you're actually seeding dice and whatnot. Fuck, where's that little fucking shit?
Oh, yeah, we kind of didn't talk about that much yet, and how to set the die up to just kind of talked about the seating part of for the bullet that goes, in the die, not really how to set the die itself up.
Well, you're going to follow the manufacturer's instructions. Number one, you're not going to get creative. Don't get creative. That's how you end up with crushed cases or fuckery. And you don't want fuckery when you're dealing with this kind of shit. Isn't that right? No fuckery here. No fuckery allowed.
Pro tip, for each style of projectile that you reload, make a dummy round that's set to the proper depth and use it to set your die next time.
Yep, that works very well.
Or just buy a die for each projectile.
Oh, yeah.
And a press.
And the press. and the house to keep each press in.
Just have a progressive press for every single caliber and projectile you load.
That won't be expensive.
You know what? If you look around on the internet, there's tons of reloading caves where there are guys have 18 different presses set up on their bench.
What the fuck?
I know, I've seen some of them. These guys have ammo factories in their fucking basement.
Hey, there's a guy. Actually, I just watched a video. There was a guy that was reloading 223 for about 10 cents because, get this, the guy was going down to the range, sifting through the backstop and getting the lead out of the backstop and then smelting the lead.
Oh, I heard about someone doing that. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
It's actually usually only a couple inches under. It's pretty easy to get.
Have you thought about doing that, Janner?
If I ever have a shortage of lead, I might, but I've still got like 400 pounds out in my shop, so I'm good for a while. Speaking of which, the guy I buy it from just told me he's got 30 more he wants to sell me, so I need to go pick that up.
30 pounds?
30. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's a lot of lead. All right. So what I'm doing right now is, because this die in particular is both a seating and crimping die, I have to first set the projectile to the depth that I want, then I'll be doing the crimping. You really want to make sure you get this right, and you really want to overcam your press. Isn't that right, Janner?
That's a source of debate, but I would agree with you. Not all presses are capable of doing it either.
Ooh, I get to play with the seating depth. Now that I have put a projectile with powder in there, I get to ever so slightly bring it down a little bit, run it up, better depth, not yet, bring it down a little bit more, bring it up, and again, not quite there. And I am going to take my time doing this because I really don't want to overseat. Is that a thing? Seat it too deep? What would you call that?
Why are you measuring?
Not measuring. What?
No, I mean like with calipers.
Why aren't I?
Yes.
Because it's got a cannilever, so I'm just going to set it to the cannilever.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Why would you be measuring, Elixir?
Because my seating depth actually matters.
Why does it matter for you?
It can totally change my point of impact. And if I seat out too far, I can drastically raise the pressure.
What happens when you drastically raise the pressure?
Your gun explodes.
And you don't want that, do you?
Not particularly, no.
Do you have a fixed distance you like to set off your rifling?
It's
Were
kind
you
of
fucking around with that the other day? I remember you
Yeah.
talking about that in IRC.
Yeah, I was playing around with it. There's a whole lot of different, but basically for jumping to your lands, which is shooting away from your lands instead of into or right against, it's most common to seat about 17 to 18 thousandths away from the lands, and that just avoids any big pressure spikes and everything to actually move the bullet.
So you're not one of those guys that leaves it extra long on purpose and uses the rifling to actually seat the bullet.
Actually, I was going to. Then I started playing around with quick load, and I was not really sure if I wanted to go by CIP or SAMI specs, and it was kind of bordering on that. So I said, fuck it.
I haven't played with that yet either, but I'm curious.
Now you have a Savage, right, Elixir?
Yep.
Magazine fed 338, isn't it?
For that one, yeah.
Does the magazine list the maximum overall length of case you can fit in it?
Oh, I think so, yeah.
Because I noticed that on the 300 Win Mag 110 we have at work, is that it lists the maximum length that you can feed out of the magazine reliably.
Oh, yeah. I think mine does, but for what I reload for the most, which is my 308, it's a single shot. So for that, it doesn't matter.
Ooh, I think I've got a nice crimp going on already. And what is crimp? It's just the case hugging the bullet. Because these bad boys have a lot of recoil, you want to make sure that they're hugging it. Not too much, because what happens when you get too much crimp, Jennifer?
Increase your pressure, potentially. Could be screwy. Also, the other reason you're crimping is we talked about your expansion step. You're taking that bell back out of that case that you put in it originally.
Yep. That's what I'm doing right now. I'm gonna set the die to the height that I liked for the crimping. And yes, we're gonna be finishing very quickly because I think we literally just finished. Janner, do you want to quickly touch on progressives and then we're gonna finish?
Sure. So I've got one over here. Basically, all the steps we talked about, you just set them up one station at a time. I'll see if I can get this here in a way that makes sense. So that is a Dillon 650. Now, if we look up, I've got a bullet feeder on it. So that drops bullets down this tube. You can see we've got a powder throw station, depriming, case feeder. The powder throw expands while it drops the powder. This is a powder checker. It will go off if there's too much powder or not enough powder. Sounds like that. This is right now, I'm running seating and crimping in the same stage, but I do have another station available, so I could crimp at the same time. Off to the other side here, you can see we've got primer feed. That goes off if I run out of primers. But basically, the nice part about this, you can't see it on the other side. There's this little bucket. I'm all backwards here. That's where bullets come out. So I don't have a bullet feeder on it yet. This is my bullet seating station. You could have a pass-through die or a Mr. Bullet feeder that does that. But the beauty part about these, this camera wants to walk all over the fucking place. That's going to have to be good enough. Once you have this set up, I've got a few projectiles here. I will move that out of the way. Projectile goes here. Now we look, up we go. So it's bitching at me about the powder in the next station. Yeah, I push that forward. That's another primer set. Every time I do that, a bullet comes out the end. So I've got a janky case there. That's that Sumbro bullshit I was talking about. The primer holes are always in the same place. This, if I do my part, I can get 800 rounds an hour out of this sucker. So all those stages we talked about, I've set these up one at a time, checking my lengths, checking my crimp, checking my powder charge, checking that the primers are set where they should be. But that's it. That's all. So I just cranked that out a couple times. And what do you know? We've got lots of nice little bullets there. So I've put a couple thousand rounds through this already. That Lee Pro, it would jam up about every 25. I haven't had this jam up yet. It is a beautiful thing, and I like it quite a bit. The big thing to be aware of, people ask, should I get a progressive to start? I would recommend against it for a couple reasons. One, there's just a lot going on, and it's hard to understand. If you have something go wrong, it could be on one of 5 stations. So if you don't know what you're doing, it's hard to diagnose what might be wrong. The other reason I would suggest it is I would not reload precision ammo on that. My rifle, I still do on my single stage. I will reload 223 on that, anything that feeds through a semi-auto. But a single stage is not a bad thing to have ever, even with a progressive.
If you're looking for kind of a medium through them, the turret press can kind of be a healthy medium because you do still have to do a bit more manual stages, turning things around yourself. But the thing with a turret press is it's got 3, 4, sometimes even 5 stations on it, where you can go and set up things like that progressive instead of turning the bullets every time you go and turn the stations. And so if you're looking, and it gives you the option then, if you're looking for precision, you just put one die in as if it was a single stage, and you go at it like a single stage, because your bullets, your case stays in the same location every time. Just about the only thing I don't think you can do on that is priming. You cannot do priming on most turret presses, as far as I understand.
Yeah, it'll depend, but yeah, you're right. And a turret, like you say, you can run as many or as little as you want. You can on this as well. The real place where this shines for me is, I mean, we talked about what we did this week, but I put a round count to that looking through my shooting journal. I shot 2,000 rounds of 9mm in the last 2 weeks. So doing that on a turret or on a single stage, that's going to take a while. Whereas this, like I say, if I'm hitting 800 an hour, I can come down here for half an hour, crank out what I need, for the day, for a 3-gun match, for a class, whatever it is, and away we go. So for me, it's just efficiency. We can do it single stage, but I don't have the time.
You don't have time. And folks, that's reloading. There is way more shit that we haven't talked about. But since this is episode 3, we're not going to do it for episode 4. That's enough. Unless you guys have pressing questions that you want answered, post them on the forum. Go to IRC. We're there all the time. We might be able to help you out. We might not. We have some knowledge, but not all. Nobody here has blown themselves up, so nobody's learned that lesson. And yeah, folks, if there is anything else you'd like to mention,
I guess the Mauser can wait until next show.
Yeah, next week
went on for a pretty long time.
Yeah, we'll do Mauser next week.
So yeah, if you guys think of any questions about the Mauser K98, that is going to be the mill cert for next time. So if you have any questions about the rifle of Germany, then post them, come find me or something, and post them in next week's thread, and I shall try to address them as best as I can.
Your accent is terrible.
It's awful.
Shut up, you scheiß coffee.
Thank you, folks, for coming tonight. Thank you for watching. Those of you that are still with us 2 hours in. I've been your host, the Core Over. Say good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Auf Wiedersehen.
And see ya in 2 weeks. Goodbye.